Hello and welcome to this week's Ruby Shoes podcast, bringing you the very best of local entertainment across East Anglia each and every week. Now, this week on the podcast, we talk to two well-known local actors. One who has a new book about to be published and the other who's about to perform in a Victorian play called Gaslight this week. We also have a review of a rather brilliant murder mystery musical, plus as always a roundup of some of the region's top shows coming your way very soon, which you won't want to miss. First, let's start with a show which is due to open on Thursday of this week. Gaslight is being performed by the Trinity Players, and I met up with one of the actors as she was doing some last-minute swatting up of her lines. For the Ruby Shoes podcast today, we're back by the sea. It is one of my favourite places to be. And I'm sitting in front of Rachel Sloane. We've got a lovely cup of coffee in front of each of us. Now, she almost needs no introduction because Rachel Sloane is known by so many of the Suffolk audiences. First for her time with Radio Orwell, then, of course, her extensive career with BBC Radio Suffolk. When she hung up her headphones on the radio, she still continued to do a huge amount of other things. She was involved in conference facilitation, media training, public speaking training, presentation, self-confidence skills, copywriting, after-dinner speaker, conference speaker. Honestly, the list went on. And she also was feature writing through all of that career as well. I'm glad to say she's still doing the feature writing with Suffolk and Norfolk Life. She's also an active member of the Felixstowe Community Choir and has been for the last 12 years. Not one to rest on her laurels. Rachel is now going to be treading the boards. It's with the Trinity Players, and she's here to tell us more about it. Rachel, welcome to the Ruby Shoes podcast.
Thank you very much indeed.
That's almost the end of the interview. There was so much of an intro there. I kid, absolutely. Tell me about Trinity Gaslight, because this is a performance you're going to be in, and you've got quite the part, so there's a lot to learn. So tell me more about it. Tell me about your character and also about the whole concept of Gaslight.
Well, Gaslight was a play written in the 1930s that was made into film, and Ingrid Bergman, I think it was, played the lead. And nowadays people use this phrase, gaslighting. Or just that, oh yes, she's been gaslighted, he's gaslighting her, meaning trying to persuade someone it's their fault rather than the other person's. And it actually came from this play.
I never knew that.
Yeah, it comes from Gaslight by Patrick Hamilton. And I was in it, when I was in my early 20s in Framlingham Amateur Dramatic Society, when I was young enough to play Nancy the Maid. And we were talking about what to do at Trinity Players, which is a church-based drama group. They're not religious plays, but they've always got a bit of like a thinking angle to them, something to make
like
you think
about.
Really, a point, yeah, exactly. Like a thought for the day sort of thing, And I said, what about Gaslight? Because no one knows where this phrase comes from, and it comes from this play. Brilliant. And I rejoined the group. I was one of the founder members 30-odd years ago. Rejoined the group after COVID when I went along to support them when they started again, and thought, I'd quite like to do this again. So asked to join, but just do very small parts, because I didn't think at my age I could learn the lines, but I'm afraid 3 years on they've got bigger and bigger, and I've ended up with quite a large role in this Gaslight.
So tell me about your role.
I play Ruff, who in the play is written as a retired police inspector, but it's actually set in Victorian times, so they wouldn't have had female police inspectors. So we've sort of tweaked it slightly, and so I'm a private detective, and I'm playing it as a sort of cross between Miss Marples and Gentleman Jack. Imagine
nice,
that.
yes.
Lots of striding along confidence bit, but actually she's a sort of private detective.
Yeah.
And there's been this case that's been bugging her for years, and she sees history sort of repeating itself. And so it is about a woman who's being gaslit by her husband, who is I don't want to give too much away.
No.
But he is gradually trying to persuade her that she's going mad by hiding things of hers. And when he goes out at night, the gaslight in the Victorian sitting room goes down and goes up, and she's sitting there absolutely terrified and thinking she's going mad. And it's a psychological thriller.
Oh, it sounds so good. And right up my street. I love a good psychological thriller. I love the fact that you'll be in it, so I'll be able to come and watch you, not to put more pressure on you.
Oh, no, not at all. But it's Trinity Players are what I would call a sort of studio style production. It's not like a big theatre with rows and rows of seats. You know, 30 people maybe watching, 40, quite casual, tea served in the interval sort of thing. I mean, there's lighting, there's sound, there's all the usual stuff, but it is quite low-key.
Intimate as well.
Intimate, that's a good word.
Lovely.
Intimate, yeah. And we've got a really strong cast. Mrs. Manningham, who's on stage almost the whole time, the woman who's being subjected to this, is played by Jane Cassidy, who is brilliant. And Mr. Manningham, the evil husband, is Michael Sherborne. And we're all Felixstowe people. And I play, as I said, rough. And then there's some supporting cast. There's the housekeeper and the maid and a policeman who comes on at the end. But the three of us have an awful lot of lines to learn.
I bet you do. But I'm sure you're going to be brilliant at it, because everything I've ever known that you've done, you've always done brilliantly. You know, you're one of these people that if you're going to do it, you have to do it well or not at all.
It is taking up quite a lot of my time. I have my script in front of me now, and I've just flicked through the pages, showing you what's been highlighted. And there's an awful lot of lines to learn, but at least not as much as Jane has with Mrs. Manningham, which would be really terrifying.
And do you find that the more you get into it, the more you're carried along by the cast, because it's a narrative, isn't it? It's a story that you're involved in, so it's almost as if what they say then sparks your next reaction.
Yeah, completely. And I've joined my first drama group when I was 7. And I played, it was a children's theatre company in Ipswich, and I played Titania wearing my mother's nightdress in an extract from Midsummer Night's Dream. And I've never been into sport. Anyone who knows me knows sport just isn't my thing.
You and me both.
But when I hear people saying, oh, you have to do sport as a child because it involves teamwork and commitment, and I think, well, you get that when you do amateur theatre or music. You know, if you play instruments, it's the same thing. And so off and on through my life, I've belonged to quite a few different groups. There was quite a gap when the career got in the way, so it's quite fun to be back with it again after all these years.
Oh my goodness. So it's
Trinity Players, and it's at Trinity Church, Methodist Church, in the centre of Felixstowe, sort of top of Bent Hill, and it's on 14th, 15th, 16th of November at 7:30. And it's so low key, we don't have a website or anything like that. How do you get tickets? Tickets are just £10. You can order them in advance by calling our lovely ticket people on their home number. I'll give you their number now, or you can just pay on the door. And it's 01394, so the code for Felixstowe 285305. So 285305. Well, just turn up. We'd love to see you.
It's almost like Rachel's done that before. You went straight back into radio mode then. It was perfect. Consummate professional. Rachel Sloane, pleasure to talk to you. Break a leg, that's all I can say.
Thank you very much.
Last week we were invited along to see Murder for Two by the Theatre Chipping Norton. They performed for 2 nights at the Wolsey Theatre in Ipswich, and I took my sister along with me to see this brand new musical comedy.
In 2 minutes. Thank you.
2 minutes, that's all we've got to come and see Murder for Two. We're at the New Wolsey Theatre tonight. Murder for Two is a new musical comedy. It's by Kellen Blair and Joe Kinosyan, and it's all performed by the Theatre Chipping Norton. It says they put the laughter into manslaughter. Do you think that's possible? We'll find out. Well, that was Murder for Two. What a different experience. I've got to be honest, when it very first started, I thought, I'm not sure whether I'm going to get this, because it was so fast-paced, there was so much happening. And then within about 5 minutes, I was completely hooked. So you've got 2 characters, and not only are they fantastic pianists, fantastic vocalists, but amazing actors as well. And they're playing all these different characters just between the 2 of them. And now I know that does happen, and that's what actors do, but it was really fast. And because it was a farce as well, it's comedy. Comedy's really hard to do. You can't put a foot wrong. It was funny. There was lots of audience participation, especially one chap who had to come and lie on the stage at one point, which was hilarious for everybody else, probably apart from him. Here with my sister, Mel, who sounds probably just like me, so I swear there is 2 of us. Sounds like I've gone out for a night away and I'm just pretending that you're here. Can you speak at the same time so people know you're really here?
I can, yes, and I am really here, yes.
So there are 2 of us.
There are.
What did you think? And be honest, because it was really different, wasn't it?
It was. Not like anything I've ever seen before. It was fast-paced. If you got it within 5 minutes, then you probably got it at twice the speed that I did.
I get most things faster than you, to be fair. It's because I'm younger, you see.
Yes. It was really unusual, not what I was expecting at all. Very, very good, very clever, very fast-paced. You really had to keep up, and it's very entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a huge round of applause at the end as well, and some people standing up as well because they just loved it so much. And they really looked like they enjoyed performing it.
They did, yes. They were so into their character. They thoroughly looked as if they were enjoying it. It didn't look like a job. It looked like they were just having a night out.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. I thought, you know what? They're probably thinking, we make money doing this.
I know. And most people would want a job like that, wouldn't they? Where they can enjoy themselves making money.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. They worked incredibly hard for it. The poor female lead, she kept picking up a towel literally because she was dripping with sweat because she's just actually having to move and do all these different characters so fast. But they were really good, and it was just a really enjoyable evening. So Murder for Two, a new musical comedy by the Theatre Chipping Norton. Sadly, it's not back in our area. It has been here. It's been at the Theatre Royal in Bury St Edmunds. Obviously, we've just been to the new Wolsey Theatre as well. And it was at the Mercury in Colchester. So it comes around again. Can thoroughly recommend it. There we go. You don't have to say anything more now. You're really pleased you came out with it?
Yeah, when you asked me, you didn't tell me I was going to have to do that.
That's what sisters are for.
And I probably sound croaky and disgusting.
It's all right. I'm croaky and disgusting too. In fact, I gave it to you.
And I probably sound... I know.
I gave you the germs.
I probably sound really soft whenever I'm recording. I sound too soft.
Genuine thanks must go to my sister Mel for joining me that night. We were both recovering from colds and neither of us had very much voice, so apologies for that. Finally, I was contacted by a well-known actor, Jeff Shankly, who is currently spending some time in Suffolk while he takes time out from acting and concentrates on another love of his, writing. For the Ruby Shoes podcast this week, I'm with Jeff Shankly, and Jeff has had a huge and successful career in theatre and also on TV, and I'm very lucky that he's currently in Felixstowe, so I've managed to nab a word with him because as well as all that, he's also the author of 17 books, I believe. 18 books is now just mouthing at me, 18 books. So before we talk about them, Jeff, let me just give an overview. Tell people a bit about you, because you've done so much work with people like Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber. You've been on our TV screens from as far back as, say, Dixon of Dock Green up to things like The Bill and so many more things besides. So give me a potted history of you first of all.
Hi there, it's great to be here and talk to you. My career started when I was about 12 years old. I was put forward for a television production, which, as you said, was Dixon of Dock Green, and one thing kind of led to another. But it actually started before that. It started at school, and one of the teachers organised a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I think the chap that was going to be playing Puck, his parents were going to emigrate to America, so they were left with this big hole, and the drama teacher came to me and said, "How do you feel about playing Puck?" And I said, I've never done Shakespeare, isn't it? She said, yes, it is. Yeah. I said, well, it's poetry, and I don't think I'm into poetry that much, you know. She said, well, I think you do very good. So I agreed to do it. And what really surprised me at the time was that I learnt the whole thing in about 2 weeks. And I thought to myself at the time, isn't that fascinating? Now, I'm failing when it comes to learning mathematical equations and physics and historical dates, and yet I can memorize this quite complicated poetry and understand it.
So how did you go from a school play to being in Dixon of Dock Green? Who put you forward for that?
I tell you, at that particular performance, there was a lady that had been brought in to do the makeup. And she said, Elsie Warren, her name was, sweet lady, and she was a teacher, and she said to her husband, I really think you should look out for this young man. He's a bit of a rough-cut diamond. And he said that he would watch out for me. And then I finished my studies, and I was about to go to the Royal Academy, but I'll get to that in a minute. And then I got a call. My agent, who I was given at that time, said, oh, there's a chap that wants to see you. They're casting a television series called You and the World for schools television. about a young girl and a young boy that leave school and what they encounter in the first couple of years. Big break. And so I went in, and he said, "You don't know me, do you?" I said, "No, I don't." He said, "My name's Charles Warren, and the woman who did the makeup for when you played Puck suggested that I keep an eye on you. So I thought I'd bring you in." And I read the script, and he gave me the part.
Wow.
And then I went on to do Mysteries and Miracles, which is another television series. But unlike the first television series, where I played the same character all the way through, this time he gave me the opportunity to play 2 or 3 different characters in each episode. So it was a wonderful training ground.
Okay. The thing is, Jeff, when I said potted, there's so much we could talk about. We would be here till next week.
No, I'm afraid
and that
so.
we'd probably only cover half of your thing. So you did give us a clue that you'd been to the Royal Academy.
Yeah.
Was that the next obvious step for you after leaving school?
Well, again, it was Charles that said, one of these days you're going to meet a role that you won't know how to deal with. So it's probably a good idea if you get properly trained. And I thought to myself, I'm a headstrong teenager. You think, well, I'm working, I'm making money, and, I'm doing all right.
Who you?
Why should
Who
I
you
give
to
it
tell
up?
me?
But, well, yeah, but he was the head of schools broadcasting, so I did listen. And I auditioned for the Royal Academy, and I went along, and I was 16 and a half, and the average person that went there was in their late 20s and early 30s. And there were 2 people on the front door called Bosun and Sergeant. And I remember Bosun saying to me, "Don't worry, son, you'll get in. You're wearing a tie and a collar and a suit."
Oh, so you're well turned out. Well done.
I didn't get in. What happened was that I'd done this speech from Julius Caesar, and I went in, "Wherefore rejoice, what conquest brings you home?" And I lifted my arms, as you do, and you think you do, and they stayed there for the whole minute and a half of the speech. I couldn't get them down. I was petrified. So I walked around like a plastic tree. And they said to me, "Well, that's it, because they don't write to you. You either get it or you don't."
Yeah.
But they sent me a lovely letter. And they said, "Look, we really do think you've got something to offer theatre. Can you try again in 2 or 3 years' time?" And I thought, "Oh, that's encouraging." And then I got another series from Charles Warren, and I then auditioned in jeans and a T-shirt, looking rather scruffy, and I got in.
Oh, wow.
And they offered me a role, and I was the youngest person that had ever got into the Royal Academy at 17 years old.
That's
I was too young.
Too young, maybe. But they obviously did see something. You said yourself you were the rough diamond then.
Well, that's what they said.
So, was it from then that you got the work with Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber? How did that come about? And tell us just some of the musicals that you've been in, because there's been so many.
Yeah, the first Andrew Lloyd musical I did was, Andrew Lloyd Webber musical was Jesus Christ Superstar, and I played Pontius Pilate in that. And then I went on to Cats, and then on to Starlight Express. And I also did a couple of workshops for him. He's got this amazing place in near Newbury, and he's got a deconsecrated church, so he tries out all his musicals there. And we did the first workshop of Phantom of the Opera, and I played one of the managers. I didn't do it because there was an 8-month wait, and I was offered an amazing part in a musical called Time by he was Dave Clark of the Dave Clark Five.
Of course,
he was a producer, and he said, "Look, you're what we're looking for, a sort of rock and roll Shakespearean actor. So can you lose a pound or can you lose a stone and be there in a few months?" And I said, "Yeah, I can." And it was an extraordinary experience.
Amazing.
But I think when I left RADA, when I was at RADA, I was a very wooden actor. It was almost a religion not to sing and dance, because that's not what serious actors did. And they rather looked upon the musical theatre as something that was a bit beneath them, which I thought was a bit arrogant. And while I was at the Lyceum Theatre in Edinburgh doing a season there, I got called to audition for Pontius Pilate, and I went for it, and I got it. I didn't know what was happening, but I got it. And I had 18 months of the most exciting time of my life, having an overture that kicked in while you're in the dressing room and going down. I was hooked for life.
I bet.
I absolutely loved it. I still did classical theatre,
Yeah.
and I still did
But you could cross
TV.
over between the two.
It's
Yeah,
important.
or three,
I think.
yeah.
It's important. I think from a casting director's
I
point
think
of
it's
view.
kept your feet on the ground as well.
Sorry.
I think it's kept your feet on the ground as well, Jeff.
Yeah, I think it has. My son always said, I'm here to make you sure you don't get above yourself.
Good, as any children can. And then I want to ask you about your books, because you started writing during lockdown. I thought you'd got 17 books, but you were mouthing to me actually 18. You are literally a prolific writer, aren't you? So tell me about the latest book. Can you tell me about that? Because they're all quite different, aren't they? All different genres that you've written about, or maybe I'll give you a chance to talk about your favourite one, whichever. Tell our listeners of Ruby Shoes.
I don't really have a favourite one, I think, because being an author yourself, you know that you tend to fall in love with your characters, and there's almost a feeling of betrayal at the end of it, where you've left them with anxiety or an unhappy ending. And so I incorporated that into one of the books that I wrote called Bonjour Dada, and that was about the war in Passchendaele in the First World War. A soldier comes home and his mind is totally fractured, and it was at the time when Dadaism, the painting idiom, was coming about, which was all fractured, and I tried to tie the two together as well, and that proved to be interesting. But where the characters in the book jumped out and started talking and negotiating and debating with the writer, as to why did you do this and why did you leave me? And yes, you dress me well, but men are frightened. It pushes them away. How can you write about women when you don't understand them? They were giving him a hard time, or giving me a hard time coming up. But it's a great writing is a great way to actually discover who you are, what your real motivations in life are, what your thresholds and what boundaries are, what your real politics are, and what you believe about all the big questions like religion and things. These get thrown up while you're writing, and these are... I think that for me is what writing is. It's the questions that have hung about in my subconscious that have demanded answering.
And do you think, rather like when you were a young man and you didn't think anything about becoming an actor and it happened, do you think writing has happened upon you the same way, that perhaps you would never thought you would be a writer and suddenly here you are?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, because I didn't think I would be an actor. And that was the subject of not only my second book in one of the series, but also part of a talk that I gave recently. And I called it The Triangle of Velocity. Now, it sounds terribly intellectual, but actually it's a navigational term, which means if you're flying an aircraft from A to B, what's going to happen is you're going to finish up at C, because the wind speed will blow you off course.
Yeah.
So you create a triangle. Mm-hmm. So you have to mark it to D, and the plane yaws towards it, and it blows you on to B.
Yeah.
So that's not where you expect it to be, but often where you end up is a far more exciting place. And I wanted to be a pilot, desperately wanted to be a pilot. And I was in the Junior Air Force when I was younger. I got my gliding wings when I was 15. And I was an RAF marksman with rifle shooting. And so that turned out that I had a perforated eardrum. And so there's no way.
That ruled you out, yes.
I would, sorry?
That ruled you out, I would imagine.
Did,
yeah.
because I had a glue ear, and so I wouldn't have been able to fly. So, by default, the only other thing was drama that I seemed to be reasonably good at.
And thank goodness.
Well,
thank goodness for your medical thing that kept you out of the sky. Perhaps not for you, but for the rest of us, because we got to see you on stage and on TV.
No, I guess so.
Tell us.
Nobody gets to 40 unscathed. So I'm a great one for psychology, for psychotherapy, and things like that. And if ever I'm up against a wall, I like talking to people that know what they're talking about. And I remember this psychotherapist, when I was studying psychology, saying to me, you would have been a very bad pilot, Jeff.
Yes,
I said, what
true.
do you mean?
There you go.
What do you mean? She said, because it's you and the instruments. You and the instruments. and you're far more inventive. You've got more imagination, so you would have been bored to distraction.
Yeah.
And I think there's an element of truth in that.
I think so. Jeff, it's been fascinating to talk to you. Final question, how are we going to get hold of these books? At what point are we going to be able to see Jeff Shankly books on our maybe local bookshop shelves, do you
Well,
think?
I think that probably sometime within the next month there'll be the first one, which is called The Strange Tale of the Black and White God. It's set in 1860 on a ship to Bombay, and all of the suppression, the emotional suppression that happened at that time. The second one that I'm having edited now is Ganoth Gar, which is a Norse saga and is being done as an illustrated book. And the third one that's coming back from my developmental editor is called Hot Cross Buns for Hitler, which is set during the Second World War, about orphan children that have been evacuated during the war, and they think they're getting special treatment because their parents all died doing espionage for the country, but actually they're being prepared for a very important mission in France, and they'll be given the choice of whether they wish to do it or not. There's no pressure on them. But of course, being children, they want to contribute, and they get pats on the back for that, big pats on the back from Churchill.
Jeff, it's been a pleasure to talk to you for the Ruby Shoes podcast. Thank you so much for your time today, and good luck. We'll look forward to looking out for your books. Jeff Shankly, you heard it here first. He's just passing through Felixstowe, so grab his books while you can, and you'll probably see he's got a local book signing coming up soon as well. So when we get news of that, I'll update you.
Thank you ever so much.
Here are even more great shows you just might like to check out.
What's on across Suffolk with Stephanie McIntyre, sponsored by Ruby Shoes Podcast, your weekly entertainment news podcast. Available from your smart speaker, Apple, Spotify, or you just follow Ruby Shoes Podcast on Facebook and click on the weekly podcast link to listen.
There's a host of great shows on offer across Suffolk's magnificent theatres, and here's just a selection to tempt you. Monday the 18th of November, Ned Boulting's Marginal Mystery Tour, and 1923 and all that at the Apex Theatre in Bury St Edmunds. Ned Boulting returns, but this time he's 101 years too late for the 1923 Tour de France. In his latest celebration of the greatest race on earth, Ned delves into the hidden mysteries of a mysterious roll of film from the 1923 Tour de France that fell into his possession during the COVID pandemic and inspired his best-selling book, 1923. Part detective story, part murder mystery, part costume drama, part French farce, Ned weaves his own typically ridiculous story into the astonishing discoveries he makes about the hidden world of the 1923 Tour de France, its characters and tragedies, and ties it all together with the wild upheavals of Europe in between the wars. And along the way, in an evening's odyssey, he draws a connection between the heroes of yesteryear and the champions of today, from Cavendish to Pogacar and beyond. It's a touching, hilarious, fascinating journey that bounces between the centuries, but always has La Tour at its very heart. Go to theapex.co.uk to get those last remaining tickets. Tuesday the 19th and Wednesday the 20th of November, this time at the Marina Theatre in Lowestoft. The Marina Company premieres their first devised production directed by Danny O'Hara, Isla Saves Christmas. Isla loves Christmas. She enjoys it all. The writing, the cards, wrapping the presents, the carols, the parties, the Christmas Day church service. But she's being teased at school. Christmas is for losers. All is not well in the town where she lives either. Parents are struggling financially, there's family tensions and troubled teenagers. Will Isla be able to save the season of goodwill? Danny O'Hara is an experienced director specialising in devising new work and large-scale outside promenade pieces in non-traditional theatre spaces. She specialises in productions where professional actors and members of the community perform together. Click on marinatheatre.co.uk for more details. Wednesday the 20th of November, this time at the Ipswich Regent Theatre. Strictly Come Dancing legend and judge Anton Dubek takes to the stage with his brand new show for this autumn. With his live band, special guest Lance Ellington and his dancers, expect a fabulous evening of song, dance and laughter. Anton will be performing songs and dances from some of his favourite eras throughout the decades. Also expect behind-the-scenes stories from his time on Strictly that will have you laughing out loud. Don't miss this special opportunity to get up close to the king of the ballroom. For your tickets, go to ipswichtheatres.co.uk. And finally, Saturday the 23rd of November at the Spa Pavilion Theatre in Felixstowe. The history of rock is back and bigger than ever. Join them as they celebrate a rock lineup like no other, headlined by one of the greatest bands of all time. As always, this show will be taking audiences on a thrilling ride through the history of rock, but this time they're turning the spotlight on Led Zeppelin as they headline the ultimate rock concert lineup. A must-see for any fan of rock. Experience this iconic music brought back to life by an exceptional band consisting of some of the finest musicians and performers from around the world. Join the Spa Pavilion and experience a rock show like no other. Go to spapavilion.uk for your tickets. Next week, we hit Panto season. Oh, yes, we do. The Panto stars have been in town for some publicity and we are invited along to interview them. Don't forget, you can always get in touch with us via our Facebook page at Ruby Shoes Podcast. We'd love to hear about your forthcoming plays, your comedy, or perhaps your Panto so we can tell everybody else. And you can listen again to any of the Ruby Shoes podcasts via Apple or Spotify, or just go onto our Facebook page and click on the podcast links. You can follow us there too for all the latest entertainment news. I'm Steph McIntyre. Thanks for listening. We'll chat more about live theatre and all kinds of entertainment next week. In the meantime, check out our socials at Ruby Shoes Podcast. We're on Twitter or X, Facebook and Instagram. We'd love you to follow us there too, and have a great week.